Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to predicting the price of cheese. This is the Augur Cheese Wizards Hackathon workshop. It's going to be a lot of fun. I guess right before we I'll give you just a quick overview first before introductions. So if we have this GitHub repo, it's just Augur project / Augur UI. Within the docs of that repo, you're going to find the predicting the price of cheese kind of markdown README, which is going to have a lot of the information we're talking about today, kind of highlighted here. So some of the good links, just want to quickly kind of go over. You know, I recommend you join our Discord. So there's an invite here. If you want to specifically just relate it to this hackathon, we have a channel within there. Tom, what's it called? What's our hackathon?
Cheeze Hackathon.
Cheeze Hackathon. So join our Discord, join that channel, chat with us, or if there's other, it's a big Discord, so if you have other questions about the platform, the protocol, things like that, it would be a good place to reach out to us after this workshop. Outside of that, there's some good links on here. We're going to be going over our SDK. So we have some links to our API documentation in here. This is going to be useful for you, especially for things we don't cover today, because they're like Augur's pretty massive. Outside of that, we got a really cool glitch, think like kind of CodePen boilerplate we've kind of created, so we can play with that today. And you'll be able to kind of fork that off and run with that if you want, or just use it as a reference. So that being said, hello. So I'm just going to quick introductions. My name's Andrew D'Amelio. I work here at the Forecast Foundation working on Augur. I've been here for about a year. Before that, I was working at Consensus on all types of interesting projects. And yeah, I mostly work on the front end, the UI to Augur at this time. And my colleague Tom is with us today as well.
Hello, I'm Tom. I've been working on Augur for almost 2 years now. Currently the UI dev lead. And join our Discord if you have any questions. You can drop them in anywhere, but the channel we created, Cheeze Hackathon.
Yeah, and most likely on that Discord, it could be a good chance Tom will be the one answering your question. So just know he's
we do have Smarty Pants, which is a group that answers a lot of questions that frees up the developers to actually develop. But we're always available, and if you want to really hit us with a question, the dev channel will work. And if you're going to be building on version 2, which is what we'll go over here, just make note of that it's version 2. There's been substantial changes in version 1. There's been substantial changes in version 2.
Yeah, so just take note of that. Throughout this workshop, we might drop that terminology, V1, V2. We're really just describing the different versions of Augur. So right now, the Augur on mainnet, the one you're all probably familiar with, if you are familiar with it, that's our V1. We're currently working on a V2 right now, hoping to have that done eventually. And when that's out, we're going to have a lot of cool improvements in that. And again, if you have any questions about that kind of stuff, Discord or later in the workshop. So yeah, today we're going to just, we're just going to be taking a little bit of time to generally just talk about what Augur is for anyone who's not familiar, kind of go over some of the more interesting aspects of it as it could relate to this hackathon. Outside of that, we'll spend some time kind of in some code, looking at SDK integration, what that looks like, and just like some fun stuff around that. And then we'll have a section of this workshop to take any questions if you have any. But that being said, throughout this presentation, if there's something that's confusing or you need to ask a question at that time, feel free to just interrupt one of us and we'll happily answer your question. So, okay.
Just one point is everything is in JavaScript. So we'll be talking JavaScript. We will not get into any contract specific Solidity stuff. So all JavaScript, yay.
That makes me happy. I love JavaScript. So okay. So what we're looking at right now is effectively a reference UI for Augur. This is actually kind of a cool thing we're looking at, because if you've used Augur before, you'll notice that this UI doesn't look the same as the one you might be used to. This is kind of like a sneak preview of what the V2 UI will look like, but it's currently wired up to V1 contracts. So if you're interested in playing around with Augur, either related to your hackathon project or just out of interest, I recommend using the sneak preview. It's kind of giving you a little bit of a tease of what's to come, and it's just so much more usable and just a better experience. So I guess before we go into it, like on a very like simple, like 1 or 2 sentences, like what is Augur? Um, I mean, I would describe Augur as, it's this decentralized platform that allows anybody to effectively create a market about anything. And these markets are really interesting, kind of think kind of like wisdom of the crowd, or, who wants to be a millionaire? Ask the audience, except you need a little bit of ETH to have an opinion. So you get some really cool information signaling things out of these markets, as well as a kind of a financial vehicle to make trades against them. If you're looking for like architectural overviews of the protocol, I would point you to the documentations. We got really good information in here about the V1 architecture, at least. It's obviously changing in our V2 stuff, but it's a pretty good base to go from. And there's just a ton of great information in here for a lot of the stuff we're going to be covering today. So, I mean, the reference UI comboed with this documentation would get you really far. Okay. So I do want to spend some time going through the reference UI though, because I think it could be beneficial if you end up deciding to kind of build alongside Augur for some cheesy markets or something like that. Ideally, you might not be in a position where you want to kind of programmatically kind of create all of that. So if you're looking to kind of build, like you have a hackathon project just around visualizing markets or displaying them in a very nice, interesting way, you could save yourself a lot of time, just using the reference UI here to kind of create those markets instead of having to do it in code. And then you can just use this reference UI to get the markets out there, and then you can do something with them later. So that's kind of like the idea. But let's just go through some of the stuff we're seeing here on the platform. So right off the bat, what we're looking at here is kind of like the list of all the markets that people have created. And this is on Rinkeby. So this is a Rinkeby instance of our contracts. So this will work nicely with what you're doing in the Cheeze Wizards hackathon. So in terms of market types, you can think of markets as just being kind of a question that you're trying to get an answer on. And there's 3 different types of markets that Augur supports. The most common and easiest one to think about is a yes-no market. And that's what we're kind of looking at here with this, will the SpaceX launch a manned rocket by the end of 2019? That is a simple yes-no outcome. So if you think that's going to happen, you could acquire shares of that side of that outcome. And if you don't think it's going to happen, you could effectively get shares on the other side of that trade. Eventually, this market will finish. Like, we will resolve it. 2019 will come and go. And one of those outcomes will be the actual real outcome. And if you have shares of that outcome, you'll be able to exchange that for ETH. That's generally how that yes-no market works. Another type of popular market you see a lot of are categorical markets. So you can think of this as just, you have many different outcomes to trade on. So in this example, what will be the #1 killer in the United States, January 1st, 2019. And then you got all these different options. You can have up to 8 in a categorical market. And you'll see that they all trade at different percentages because they all can be traded independently. There's one more type of market that we support. It's called a scalar market. We're not going to go too much into it today. It's a little bit more complicated, but you can think of it as a bounded futures market. We have a lot more information about it in our documentation. If you have a specific like Cheeze Wizard hackathon idea and you wanted to use scalars, you have some understanding about Augur, for example, maybe something with like, what will be the power level of blue mold or blue cheese at like the end of the tournament. Like something like that would work really well against the scalar market. And if that's something you're interested in, feel free to ask us about that later today or later on Discord. So that's like the market types. There's some other interesting information that I think is important to kind of call out on these markets that we're seeing right here. The first thing I think that's really important is like when a market expires. So, I mean, for example, if we go back up, you see like this SpaceX one, this was a market that was supposed to be information, will this rocket be launched by the end of 2019? But you can really see pretty clearly that the expiry date, whoever created this actually set the expiry date to be not after 2019. So that's ideally something you would want to avoid. And if we're thinking about, if we wanted to put like the Cheeze Wizards kind of glasses on, we could think of this market as being like something related to the big cheese tournament. And if you're going to make a market around something like that, you're going to want to make sure the expiry date of that market is in a safe place for when the tournament should finish. If it's kind of open-ended, you don't exactly know when the tournament could end. There could be some giveaway. You probably want to put a very safe buffer just to make sure that that expiry date is way past the end of the tournament. So that's like one cool thing to keep in mind. Another kind of big important thing about markets is how to resolve them. And Tom will go more into this in detail with market creation and all the different aspects of it, but just very general, like something like this, like this SpaceX market. Like, so at some point this market's going to finish, and whoever is in charge of reporting on the outcome, usually the creator of the market, but not always. We'll get into that, but they're kind of responsible to say what the outcome was. Of course, that can be disputed, and there's this decentralized Oracle aspect to Augur, but let's not think about that right now. The ideally, there will be an outcome, and it will be the truthful ones. For something like this, you can see right here, the resolution source has been set to just be general knowledge. Like, this is something that, when this has happened, anybody who needs to report on this should be able to just open up Google or the news and find the information in a very verifiable, trustful way. That's kind of not debatable. If it was something more specific, for example, the Cheeze Wizards outcome, you might want to list in there the resolution source to be something like the actual smart contract for mainnet Cheeze Wizards tournament. And then in this additional details, you could list the steps to actually involved with going on an Etherscan, making a get call on the smart contract to get the win in Cheeze, and then parsing that to find out information about it. So that's something you'd want to put in there just in case if this was your market and you got into a car accident and you couldn't actually report on it, somebody else could come in and be like, whoa, that's free money to report on that market. They could read your details and do it because they're going to want to report on it accurately. Resolution details should be super clear so that any reporter can show up and they have that financial incentive to be accurate and truthful. So just to kind of cheese this up a bit, we have some cheese markets that might be able to kind of we can kind of overlay this on some cheesiness and kind of see what that kind of means. So we have a yes/no market here. Will Wizard 2010 win against Wizard 2050 in the 2019 summer tournament? So this is a yes/no market, effectively about, is Wizard 2010 going to win or not? So this could be a really cool market that might only really be interesting for these two wizards that are battling. This might be a side little thing they're doing or just some little fun, but it could also be wizards that are a part of a guild, and the guild decides they want to hedge on their wizard and do some interesting things like that. So there's a lot of, you could go down the well of this pretty far. It's up to really your interpretation of how you'd want to experience the cheese within it. The second market, this categorical one, is really fun. So what we're looking at here, is what elemental type is going to be, for that winner of the big cheese tournament, the wizard that actually wins, what's their elemental type? And so this would be a market that would be tracked throughout the tournament, and it'd be fun to kind of see the prices change as you go. So currently we see right now, fire is trending more than the other three. Maybe if this was on, a real market, there'd be data behind that. So people would be basing that on, current win counts as well as predictable win counts. So, how often does fire face air, and what are the outcomes usually? So you can start to kind of pull in all this interesting information from outside into these markets. So somebody who's maybe built a really cool tool to kind of analyze the battles might be on the side participating in a market like this because they have that knowledge, and they're incentivized to provide that knowledge back to the community as a signal, as an information signal, but they also have that incentive to do it, since again, these are traded markets. So in terms of the actual trade-in of the markets, I'm going to pass it over to Tom for a bit to kind of just walk us through kind of what that looks like and how we even do that on Augur and what that looks like.
All right, thanks. Let me share. Cool. actually. So let's look at, let's see if I have yes, no market. Yeah, so here, it's a compound market. Will it be hacked? And let's just kind of look. So for yes no markets in the reference UI, we only trade yes. It's an option style trading. So you're either long or you're short. So long and yes, you think the price is going to go up. If you short yes, you think the price will go down. Now, it's we only have limit orders, meaning that you need to put in like the quantity and the price, and it tells you how much ether is needed for the order. So these asks are someone is selling a yes share, and if there's a bid, someone is putting an order on there wants to buy or wants to sell, wants to short, yes. But we could get into that here in a little bit when we get into the glitch. So what I primarily wanted to talk about here is the order history. How do we get these percentages? So if we go here, so these percentages here, so 15%. So there's a 15% likelihood that this question will be a yes. So the 15% comes from the last trade on yes. So you can see it's a very small amount of volume, but yet it was traded at 0.15, which equates to a 50% probability that this market will be yes. So let's go to a categorical just to show a little bit of difference. So here it's a football game, Georgia against Florida, and Georgia has a 95% chance of winning according to this prediction market. And that is because Georgia was last traded at 0.95, whereas Florida was last traded at a 0.6. So as Andy said, these outcomes trade independently of each other, and there's room for people to make money off of that discrepancy if the outcomes they trade too far apart. And so that's kind of a quick high level overview of trading markets. It's a yes share for yes no markets and individually outcomes that are traded for categorical markets, and that's how the percentage chance of that outcome being the winner is calculated. So I just want to go through a quick little overview of that. We'll get more into the specifics when we get into the glitch, which I think we'll be doing here shortly. Let's see. Let's go into a little bit more of the life cycle. Let's go into the market life cycle. So we talked about trading. Andy talked about the creating of a market, different types of markets, and let's just talk about the life cycle of these markets. So when they're created, they're traded, and then after being traded, then there is the end time, which Andy talked about, and after the end time, there's the initial reporter, the designated reporter, which Andy also discussed. So what I want to talk about is after it's resolved. So here's a market that resolved to no. Now, as Andy said, that having a specific resolution source is important, as in this case, it uses a URL, or you could just use verbiage to tell the reporters how to report on this market. So if you think about it, markets have a very specific domain, and the wisdom of the crowd, the oracle itself, is just random rep owners. And we'll get into the reason there's rep later. And if you think about it, these rep holders who are incentivized for telling the truth will show up to Augur, and they're looking for opportunities to make sure that the truth is told. So they're incentivized truth sayers. And so there needs to be resolution details for the market so anybody can show up and know and find the truth so that the market resolves correctly. And so resolution source is very important. As Andy said, general knowledge for general things like big, large political elections or very large sporting events, usually general knowledge will be good. But for very specific niche markets like Cheeze Wizards, it'll be really important to fully describe the resolution source so that any person that owns rep can report on it. So let's actually get into some code. How about How about Andy? You want me to give it to you?
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
And and I would just add to what to we were talking about rep, just in case somebody's on the call who doesn't know. Rep is just that native token of the Augur platform. It stands for reputation.
Yeah, ERC-27.
Cool. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a glitch kind of we made. If you don't know glitches, it's just like CodePen. So it's just a nice kind of React app we've built to kind of demo our SDK. So what we have here is kind of like a bunch of different little components we've built to demonstrate some of the SDK functions. We got simple get market, get order. We got a create order, create market, yes no market. We have a create yes order, and then we have some rep helper functions. Again, kind of like what I was saying before, like using the SDK, you could programmatically pretty much do anything with any interactions with Augur. You could programmatically make your own checkout or create market flows, your own interesting curated market pages. Like you have a lot of flexibility, but it goes both ways. If you're just looking to do some really cool, visuals like stats type of stuff, you don't really need to worry too much about created markets and orders. You can rely on the regular Augur UI to achieve that, and you can just kind of pull in some data. But before we kind of go into that, let's just kind of look on how we kind of set up the Augur SDK within our JavaScript application. So this is kind of like the code behind to that page. This is just a very simple, kind of messy React app we threw together the last day or so. Feel free to use this as a reference or just copy it. But we're using a lot of like common patterns that you'd see in other kind of boilerplates. So, if you're not familiar with React, not a big deal. A lot of this would work with any of your front-end frameworks, be it Vue, be it Angular, be it Ember, be it jQuery. But in the context of this React app, we mount this app and we set up our Web3. So this is pretty standard. In this case, we simplified it to just like injected Web3s. So MetaMask is what you're going to want to use, or Dapper wallet for this particular example we built. So in our component did mount is kind of where we're doing the Augur SDK setup. So we've imported Augur into our project, we've npm installed it, and we're good to go. So here we just kind of create an object and we throw it on window as more of a convenience thing. Of course, you could take this Augur object and put it on your state. You could do whatever you want with it, however you want to manage it within your application. But effectively, to actually connect the SDK, you're going to have to kind of provide it this configuration payload. And this is pretty boilerplate. You're going to see this in our documentation. You're going to see this in examples. You're going to see it here, but we'll just kind of go through it really quick. So first off, you pass it kind of like an Ethereum node. So this could be like your own local node you're running, your Ganache instance. This could be, in our case, we're using a deployed Rinkeby Alchemy node for convenience. So I recommend that just for as long as you can work against Rinkeby, you're good to go. The Augur node is really interesting. So you can think of this as a market data aggregated service. So this actually is reading logs off the Augur contracts and giving them in a nice Augur node so that the UI or the SDK can use this to get market data instead of having to go to the Ethereum contract logs. So it's a little bit of a nicety. I really like that about Augur's architecture. There's this other flag, this use Web3 transport. You're going to want to set this to true when you're using your own injected Web3 provider. In our case, we're using MetaMask, so we're going to set that. And at that point, we connect to it and we're good to go. If I just jump back into the project and open up the console for a second, we can just take a look at that Augur object. Oops. And if we just kind of expanded a bit, we have a lot of interesting information in here. Let me just in case this is hard to see. So I just want to call out a few things here. One of them, right off the bat, is this contracts object. So within this, we're going to have this addresses object. So within here, we have all of these different network IDs and the contracts that relate to them. So this is really useful just if you need to know So in this case, we're working against Rinkeby. So we're going to open up the Rinkeby network. And here we see all of the contracts that have been deployed for Augur on Rinkeby. So you can see there's actually a lot of parts, moving parts to Augur under the hood. A lot of different contracts doing a lot of different things. So all of this is really well documented in the smart contracts themselves, if you're interested, or in the API documentation that we've listed. You could just do like a search on some of these things and kind of discover them. The one thing though I really want to call out, because you're going to see it as a magic string in a lot of our SDK calls, is the universe. You can think of universe as the top level contract that kind of all the other contracts live within. It's the universe of Augur on Rinkeby. So this particular universe address, smart contract address, we're going to have to provide that to the SDK to let the SDK know which universe we're working within. Outside of that, within the Augur payload, you got some other interesting things here. If you're just interested in learning more about Augur, this constants object is really good in terms of finding a lot of the constants that drive Augur. So in terms, like Tom mentioned, like the different life cycles of a market and of reporting. So you can even see that here, like what the contracts use for all the different reporting states. Same with order states. Like it's a nice way to find out what those arguments are, like these are your required arguments for a lot of things, and it's all nicely kind of set up here in the contract constants. Outside of that, you're going to have all the different contract methods for interacting with Augur here as well. So if you're doing something with markets, for example, you'll see you got all of your helper contract methods to do with markets, either getting categories or getting price history, just getting market information. And we'll look at even that a little bit more in depth in a second. But outside of just markets, things like the account information, trading information. So you have all like the tools you need within this SDK to kind of do it. And if you need more information about something, for example, if you wanted to do like create yes, no market, it'd be just a matter of, bouncing into the API document and kind of just searching it and find it. And then you can see like all the required parameters, what your expected payload is, as well as a lot more information about the SDK method. Okay, so let's look at get market data. I'll go over get market data and then I'll pass it over to Tom to talk about some of these other components. But get market data, really simple. If we just look at the code here, and I've kind of separated it between like specific Augur methods and some helper stuff we've used in the UI that you could kind of ignore if you don't care. But in terms of like get market info, it's really not that complicated. It's a very simple kind of API for this. So in this case, we're calling that augur.markets.get market info getter or method we saw. And in this case, we're providing it with a filter parameter, which is market IDs. There's a lot other kind of ways you could filter on markets. Categories and tags is a good one. I'll talk about it in a sec for Cheeze Wizard stuff. But in this case, we're just going to pass it a market ID and get back the information for that market ID. Just keep it simple. But in terms of other options you could use, that information would be in the documentation as well. So, okay. So let's make that call real quick and go through what we get back. So if I go back to Sneak Preview for a sec, I can grab the contract ID of this market and just paste it in there and do a little lookup. And it spits back all the information that it has on the market. So a lot of the stuff we've kind of gone over, and some of it we're going to go over more in different ways, but some things that kind of stand out, that universe that we were talking about, we see that this market's a part of our Rinkeby universe. So that's good. You kind of get back the market type. So this is a categorical market. There's going to be some outcomes. In this case, we know there's 4 outcomes being used out of the 8. You get an information about the author, when it was created, some of the fee stuff we haven't got into. You see the categories and tags come in here. So this is really cool. Like in a sense, if you were building your own custom, Cheeze Wizards prediction market, and you provided people with a way to create markets, you might want to hard code categories and tags into that flow. So all those markets get spit into Augur with like a certain category or tag that from like your own app, you'll be able to pull that from Augur node really easy and filter on it a lot more easier than trying to parse like descriptions and stuff like that. So we also get like some trading information, like the last trade, the volume, the open interest. You're seeing we get the designated reporter address, so who's supposed to come and report on it. In this case, it is the author, which is very common. And you also get some details here. So this is cool. Outside of that, the outcomes is really neat. So from that get market info call, we're getting back all of our outcomes, and we're also getting back the kind of like the last price of it, which is really cool. One little thing to keep in mind though, you're going to get defaulted prices sometimes. I mean, for a categorical, it's just going to be 100 divided by the amount of outcomes you have. So at one point, this market was all priced at 25 with zero volume, meaning no one's actually put any volume behind those prices, so they're not necessarily accurate. So in this case, to kind of understand what we're looking at here, you see these air, water, and neutral. No one's actually made any bids or made any purchases on those shares. Fire, on the other hand, they had 0.1 share of volume at 50%, kind of got sold for that, and we see that come back, which is really neat. So thinking in that kind of like setup, if I go back and grab this other market, this yes/no market about will Wizard 2010 beat Wizard 2050? So we can imagine these two wizards have paired off, or they're about to pair off in a tournament, and these two people have created a market, or somebody else did. So if we look at this, you see, yeah, we got yes/no back now. So effectively, a lot of it is the same information, but I just want to look at outcomes here. So this is kind of a little bit more strange because it's like, what are these outcomes mean? We got an ID, the descriptions are null. So like, what's this about? So I remember this is a yes/no market. So the way this works, will Wizard 2010 win against 2050? So this market is actually about Wizard 2010. Are they going to win or are they going to lose? So the idea of 0 is a no share, and the idea of 1 is a yes outcome. I mean, not share, outcome. So we can see here that right now, there's 91% confidence behind a little bit of volume, almost 1.1 ETH, that Wizard 2010 is going to win. He's going to beat Wizard 2050. So that's cool. Just that information alone, we could build some pretty cool kind of visualizations around this market information. So for example, we put the NFT IDs right in the description. So again, if you're making your own custom flows, this could be something that you enforce in your UI. Like if two people want to create a market, they have to, show the NFTs, prove they have them, or something, just to get that data into the market creation. But because I have the IDs here, it's pretty trivial to know, call out to Dapper's or Cheeze Wizard's API and get those assets. So I can show the NFTs, and boom, this market is about these two particular wizards battling. But we also have some real-time odds information, which is cool. So I also threw in a little battle odds thing. You click this, and then based on which wizard is more probable to win from 0 to 100%, we grow them to match that size. So we can visually see right here, that there's a 91% more chance that this blue wizard's going to win just because he's bigger. But realistically, we could do anything here. We could create some really cool visual animations of a battle taking place and the blue wizard winning up to this point. So you like, the sky's the limits on what you could do with this. And really all we've done is really made one simple get market information call. And in a perfect world, this market people would be using it and interacting with it and created it on their own. And you just created like a really cool UI to kind of slurp it up and present it in a really cheesy, fun way. Okay, so that's like get market data. We're gonna pivot now to talking about programmatically created markets and orders and all the good things that kind of go into that. So I'll pass it back to Tom.
All right, thanks. So here, let's kind of step through creating a market. We'll actually do a transaction, sign it, and all that kind of stuff. So for a market question, I need some suggestions. Someone, just some words or whatever. Anybody throw something out. I could say, anybody?
Tom's in the cheese aisle.
Yeah, I'm in the cheese aisle. It's getting cold over here. It's kind of crazy. All I see is a bunch of people with hoodies.
What will the I was going to say, what will the weather be in Montreal on August 20th?
All right.
Or let's say, will the temperature be over 70? Let's keep it no.
Be over
And 70 Fahrenheit. Yeah.
70 F. Let's say how about in the cheese aisle?
In the cheese aisle.
All right, the cheese. If I spell aisle right. All right. So how would we find out the additional details, right? Let's say what does the temp gauge say in the cheese aisle? All right, we'll do something like that. So I'm just gonna hit the create market. My MetaMask sign popped up, and then it'll run through its course, get on the blockchain on Rigby a little bit faster than mainnet, and then we'll go to sneak preview and actually see this market created, and then we'll pull the orders for that market, which will be none, and then we'll create a yes order programmatically, and we'll just kind of see how easy it is, and then we'll step through the code. Let's actually, while that's running, let's actually just step through the code right now. So we have create yes no market. So this topic here, wizards, is actually the category. In the UI, we use this category. Tag is these tags. The description I pulled off the forum. Long description. In the UI, we call that additional details. And then here we need rep to create a market. So if I go over here, here's an example of getting the rep for this account. It's in auto rep or way rep, and so 10 to the 18th, you can divide that, and then here's the get rep faucet, which is fake right here. So just an example. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna, of course, this faucet only exists on Rinkeby on our test nets. Obviously, mainnet is a different situation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to go buy rep on mainnet. Yeah. So denomination token, Andy went over the contracts that have been deployed, also with Universe. This fee per ETH in Way, that's just a settlement fee or the market fee. We talked about Epic, and there's a callback scenario for Augur.js for V1. We have a whole different SDK for V2. It'll be a way more convenient. And then we talked about the designated reporter, which just getting it off of the Web3 provider. Then there's this meta, which is interesting because we already told Augur.js that we're using Web3. Here's just more added information. So the signer being null, meaning, hey, you'll have to prompt. And we went into in time, which is a Unix timestamp, so it's all in seconds, just like blockchains in seconds. So we're just getting a future time of 1 day in advance, and that builds our parameters. We spit it out for fun, and then we're going to create that. So let's go over here, and let's see what happened. Oh, here it is right here. So will the temperature be over 70 F, right? So you can see it's a yes/no market. There's no orders on the order book. It's pretty boring. So with no liquidity, if you think of liquidity as food to fuel the market. So the more liquidity you have, the tighter spread you have, the more enticing it is for traders to come in and actually help predict the market, right? Because the traders are economically incentivized to predict the truth, right? Predict the outcome. And so that's where the meat of the data comes from. So if we look at, let me grab the ID. So more liquidity, the more enticing it'll be. Now there's ways of building a market that you can hide liquidity behind the scenes. So we went over so here's the odds. All volumes are 0, so it's pretty boring. Let's clear that. Let's see what the orders are. There's no orders. Let's see if we can create an order right quick. So this right here, we'll just do like a 0.1 on amount, price. Let's just do a 0.4 for fun. And let's create, I got my MetaMask pop-up. I'm committing that. And so what'll happen is that order will get created. So when someone takes that order, they have to take the other side. Like they have a created order to trade, get that order. So when those orders match up, each side gets shares. These market outcome shares are ERC20 tokens. So very interesting in that using the Augur protocol, you can create markets people can share on, and they end up with ERC20 tokens, which are just a regular token. So those tokens can be transferred and moved around just like any other token. So that's pretty cool, I think, because it's really using the blockchain technology so that the market creator using the Augur protocol doesn't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff.
And like a super cool point to that, Tom, is like because they're just tokens, like wallet providers could really build some really cool DeFi kind of views inside wallets around your Augur shares, for example.
Yeah, super true. So yeah, if wallets could reconcile the token address and be like, hey, I know this share token is this market and this outcome, and really bring some really good viz to it. So here we just pull the orders for that market, and now we get it. So here on outcome 1, which is yes, we create an order, we're selling a yes share. And so you can see here's the share token, and my account owns it, and it was created at this time, and it's an open order, and then there is the price and amount. And this data comes from Augur node, and if people were trading against this and they were nibbling at the order, then the original amount would stay the same, and it would just the amount that would be available would just decrement based on how it was nibbled, I'd say. So that kind of went through creating a market and then creating an order, and then we can see that order showed up here. So if someone wanted to purchase that, see in the UI it tells me I'm consuming my own order, then they would just click on that, purchase it, just like any other exchange. So pretty simple, as in anyone that really understands trading, it's a really easy jump to a decentralized trading on Augur as a market and using the protocol. So let's go through the code here a little bit with creating an order. So here, creating an order, I build that meta that'll be passed in. I got the market ID, the amount, and the price, and I just fill it in. So essentially this was an easy copy and paste from the API docs and just tweaking it. So I get the market information because I need the min, max, and numticks. Now, numticks is described in the API docs. And then I pass in the market ID, and then I just shoot it off. This is a place trade. There's a couple different methods with creating orders. You can look in the API docs here. Wanted to really simply just throw an order on the book. And then there's some nuances with creating orders. You can escrow ETH to create orders. If you already have shares, you can create an order using those existing shares, that kind of thing. Just need a little ETH for gas and throw it on the book. So I think that is it with that. As in, so some interesting thing, I'll talk a little bit about claiming winnings and finalization. So in V1, when the market is finalized, there's a 3-day waiting period, kind of a cooling off period. It was put in as kind of a security measure just to make sure all the contracts are working the way they're supposed to work. V2, there is no 3-day cooling period. And so in V2, people can claim winnings when the market is ready to be finalized. So if someone was building something for the hackathon, they could, people could be voting with ETH. They could put their ETH where their mouth is, either on that elemental categorical market or any other yes-no market. And if they're buying shares, a market creator, market provider could be selling shares just to match those wanting to vote, basically vote for fire. Someone takes the other side of that trade, and then when the tournament's over, they can actually buy those winning shares at maybe like a 0.95, 0.98. One full share equals 1 ETH in categorical and binary. So you can actually settle the market for participants before waiting the 7 days and the 3 days of the cooling off period and take a little fee. for that because it's a service, you know. So you're paying off those winning shares so that from the user's perspective, the user experience is, oh, I voted, I wagered however many ETH on this particular element, I won, and you get settled out, that kind of thing. And so it can be a pretty expedited, pretty speedy process if you want to create kind of a voting cheesy app, something of that nature. That'd be cool. I don't know. Any questions about that?
Yeah, actually, I have a simple one. So this finalization, is it like mandatory? So could it be like automated, or is it like some manual process?
Yeah, so on the blockchain, everything's manual. So markets do not finalize themselves. There needs to be a user action to send a transaction to finalize a market. There's a couple of criteria for the market to be finalized. One, it needs to be fully resolved, like not disputed the last seven-day disputing window, or they call it a fee window in V1. Then it can be finalized. That starts the 3-day waiting period. And after the 3-day waiting period, the winners they basically redeem, they pass in their shares, and they get ETH. 1 share, 1 ETH is how it resolves, and that's for categorical and yes, no markets.
I mean, I would just add there, Tom, that like there's not like, especially on mainnet, there's not a lot of markets that just sit unfinalized for very long because they show up in the UI, and if people finalize them, they get a little reward, so they're almost automatically done just based off of the incentive to do it.
Right. For when markets don't get reported on, there's a financial incentive because there's rep sitting there to be claimed for giving an initial report, and so that's the financial incentive. So for finalization, if no one's traded on the market, no one really cares about finalization except for the market creator. So they're financially incentivized to finalize a market, so they get their validity bond back, and they get their essentially they get their validity bond back when the market is finalized. So yeah, there is economic incentive to finalize markets to get them all done. Any other questions? Finalization, claiming, any other ideas?
So quick question here. Is there a way to kind of use the source code that we have for the SDK to actually read data from the Cheeze Wizards contracts? Because it'd be kind of interesting to maybe build an application that can automate building some of the markets, but maybe the user has or owns a wizard themselves and could maybe bet for it or bet against it by automatically creating a market, but that kind of requires reading contract data from Cheeze Wizards. Is there you think there's kind of a way to automate that, or?
Well, so you'd have to be on mainnet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's been a number of third parties that have created contracts to interface with the Augur contracts. So there's like a disputing pool. People they dispute particular markets that they think there's a financial incentive to dispute. And the only problem, like with finalizing a market, there has to be a transaction sent in order to kick off the whole thing. Now, it's definitely possible if you had a service that was reading the Cheeze Wizards contracts, then it could deploy its own contracts based on that. So you can have custom contracts based on that, or you could do custom market creations based on the Cheeze Wizard contracts. So yeah, just contract to contract stuff. You want to go that route, or create your own service that uses Augur.js to create markets.
Yeah, I was just thinking maybe like, I don't know if it's feasible, but just listening to I don't know if there's events for particular tournaments about to start on the Cheeze Wizards contract, but if there was, that could be like a point of automation. When you get one of those logs in, parse the relevant information out of it, create a bare bones market around that information, and then maybe like post it somewhere that maybe those people will see it. There's a lot of probably different ways you could approach that.
Yeah, I like the idea of maybe creating a widget. So there could be an embeddable widget that might sit on a Cheeze Wizard site that would allow people to vote on upcoming matches. And just kind of behind the scenes, the market would already be created. It's really inexpensive, especially on Rigby, to create markets. And then people can just vote and that kind of thing. If you want to get on mainnet, create a mainnet thing, a little bit more complicated because of the amount of rep and ether needed to escrow to create a market. You just have to see what the existing no-show bond is for mainnet. No-show bond is in rep. Just a little background. No-show bond. So no-show bond, when you create a market, is in rep, and that is to incentivize the designated reporter to actually show up and give an initial report. Now, if they don't show up in that first 3 days, then the market goes to open reporting. And that means that anybody can come in, don't need any rep, and then they do that initial report, they get that no-show bond. And so that's another economic incentive to make sure the market gets initially reported on, which kicks off the whole disputing and making the market eligible for finalization. Any other ideas? Any questions?
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, go ahead, Drew.
I just had a quick question. I just want to make sure that I'm following along okay and understanding things. I think based on what Tom said, my understanding is that, say we took a market example, like a certain wizard is going to win the entire tournament. And, it's a little unclear right now, the actual timeline of how long, each phase is going to be. So say I set the expiry for the market to be like really far in the future, like several months or even up to a year, just to be on the safe side of things. From what I understand about what Tom said, if I do declare myself as the reporter, I make the initial report, I will be able to finalize that market before the timed expiry. Is that correct? If the data is there and been reported on?
Well, the way that it works is that the end time that you set when you create the market is the time that reporting starts. And so like in the example, we say, hey, the end time is 1 day in advance. So 1 day comes, the designated reporter has from that time to 3 days to report. If they don't, then it goes to open reporting, and then that's the whole incentive. So there are some bullet points about some guidelines for reporters to figure out if a market is invalid or not. And the outcome needs to be known when the end time occurs. If the outcome is not known, invalid. If the outcome is known before the end time, invalid. That kind of thing. So there does need to be enough time after the event finishes so that the outcome is known to when reporting starts. So if you want to do like a baseball game, something simple, sporting event, then what if it gets rained out? What if it gets postponed? And the end time was like right when they thought that it was going to end, then invalid. So if they say, okay, let's create a market, let's give 24 hours, let's give a day, end time for that particular baseball game, even if it does get delayed or something like that, we should know after a day or 2 days. And then if it does get pushed, a couple hours or whatever, end time, you're still good. You're still within the valid market range. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I think the main thing is that I misunderstood that the initial reporting is done after the expiry.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But you definitely nailed the importance of that end date. Like you were saying, like it's kind of unknown with the Cheeze Wizards tournament, and that's such a good point. You would obviously want to, you wouldn't want to pick something too short because you could invalidate your whole market, and then that's a disaster. And if you do like a year, people just might not want to like wait that long. So it'd be getting the magic, that 1 month like range would be really sweet. And as Tom was saying, like there's still like this wait in time after the fact, and that can spiral off into a long time. But at least you can set up services where you could buy those shares, those win-in shares early at a premium or a little spread premium. Get them, you hold them, you wait that time, and then you exchange them all. And everybody else was able to kind of expedite that process on your profit though.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. So what we've learned from V1 is user experience. It's one of our main focuses of V2 to have a very streamlined user experience, a very streamlined onboarding process. Really understand that in the world, people that don't necessarily have the exposure to crypto, but do want to bet on very interesting markets, want to participate in trading in very interesting markets, it's really important for them to get into crypto easily. So that onboarding process is something that we're really focusing on with V2, hopefully getting people able to trade without having any crypto within 5 or 6 clicks of hitting the UI. So removing any kind of verbiage about blockchain and all that kind of stuff is really helps the end user and really kind of smooths out the transition for really getting the data that you want to get for a particular app sitting on Augur. Any other cheesy ideas?
Yeah. Does anybody is anybody building any Cheeze like hackathon projects around Augur that are on this call? Or does anybody have an idea of something they would do or could do? Might not be something they want to do.
Yeah, so it's been a big part of the idea of our project, but I've actually been discussing with the mods from the hackathon, and it doesn't seem like the idea is going to work, actually, because the window of opportunity is so small. Essentially, we wanted to create a prediction market for betting on the outcome of any duel and just sort of create them based on actual real information from the contract. But after talking to the developers in the hackathon channel, which of course everyone here could go and look at what Alan and I were talking about, it seems like the window of opportunity for like capturing a duel is too small, because there is stuff that is happening off chain. For example, the actual duel challenge, and that's really crucial for anyone that was also sort of like investigating this line of inquiry. Basically, the window of opportunity is so small for public blockchain information. The first on-chain event that will happen is an event is emitted from the contract, before anything confirms on-chain. But the event itself is called duel start. And what that means is both players have submitted their turns. Now, of course, the turns that they're submitting, they have to be validated with either the single resolver or the double commit resolver. This is the kind of the language of their smart contracts. So the bids themselves are blinded with the Ketchek algorithm, and it cross-references and takes some entropy from the wizards themselves. So the salts are going to be different, or the hashes of their turns. There's a limited amount of turns, right, based on the affinities of the wizards. But basically, the way that it works out and the way that gas is being highly optimized in this contract is that you have the data coming in so close together in sort of like bundled processing with these things like double commits, double reveal of the player's moves. So basically, it just looks like the window of opportunity is too small to bet on duels if we're depending on smart contract, to get the challenge data itself. So, one option that we're looking into right now is to allow the owners of the wizards themselves to sort of like form a gentleman's bet on our DApp.
I love that. I love that. I imagine it like kind of like like you have a battle coming up and you're fighting another wizard, and somehow you two meet on Twitter or on Reddit, and you can prove that you own those NFTs, and it sparks up a modal that just quickly generates a market for you two, and then it's there. That was a really cool idea. I remember talking to Tom. He had a really interesting idea too about wizard insurance.
Yeah, so there were some ideas that were kicked around because as a team. One of them was wizard insurance because it costs money to buy power, right? And so if people are spending ETH, they might want to buy insurance just in case they lose, and they can recoup some of that ETH. And so there would be, so the idea is if a market maker, you guys or whatever, are creating some kind of app, and then it's just like, hey, buy insurance, and then they could say, oh, I want to buy 1 ETH of insurance or something like that, and then just using Augur as a platform to create the market, buy the shares, transfer them over to whoever wants that insurance, and then reconcile it whenever the tournament's over. And so maybe the wizard went from whatever 40 to 20, power. And so they were like, well, I lost half my power or whatever. It's like, well, let's give you half your ETH or whatever, however the odds work and however the payout works and that kind of thing. And then you essentially become the house, and you become a liquidity provider for the market, and you become the insurance company. And then you would pay out based on, you could see on contract that how much they actually lost, and then pay out accordingly or something like that. So if you have, I don't know, 400 wizards, you're collecting 10% of that, and they're paying multiple ETH as a hedge, because if they lose power, they're going to be paying that ETH anyway. So then you can just hedge it. That was one example. And the other one, which I mentioned, was a voting app. So if you had some kind of embedded widget where people can just vote with like a little bit of ETH, and with the idea of if they win, they double it or something like that. However, all the liquidity and stuff works out under the covers. But it's just a way to collect that information, so you can go into more exciting visualizations like Andy brought up. And it would be really cool. Another idea that was thrown around is some kind of odds ticker. So for how are the wizards doing, and just kind of streaming what the odds are for particular wizards to win the whole match, that kind of thing. So it seems like the problem that you talked about earlier was that you don't really know what matches are coming up. There's not enough runway time to create the market, promote the market by the time that the duel actually occurs. So
yeah, well, actually, I think that Augur, in terms of engaging with this protocol, you need really well-defined time window. And the timings of the competition are a little strange, in the sense is we have the one problem: if you predict, forecast market on the whole tournament, we don't really know when the whole tournament's going to end. And then if you take individual duels, you don't know where they're going to start, sorry, when they're going to start, or when you do know that they're going to start, they're actually going to be resolved almost instantly after.
I guess an example of something that's a little bit more time bounded is you could do a market that has a hard cutoff date. Like at this point, the tournament may still be on, it may not be, but what's going to be, the power level of blue cheese at that point?
Yeah, I was thinking, also just based on what Tom was just talking about with the insurance idea, is that actually the bounded event that we do know that they have sort of put out there in their documentation is that we're always going to have a daily 3-hour duel window. And I'd really like to do something around that sort of time bounding, because maybe the way to approach it is to take a similar idea, but instead of having it be a matchup between two wizards, is this challenge going to resolve one way or the other? Maybe it should just be take the top 10 wizards of yesterday's duels and predict whether their power level is going to increase or decrease.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that makes sense. You could do do daily markets. Another thought with what you're talking about with the time constraints is you can set a market to end in the future, maybe a month, maybe in I don't know, December or something like that, right? And just pay out the winners whenever the tournament's actually done, and then you, as the developer, you just hang on to the shares and you go through the reporting process and then just settle the market. And then people who won, they win, they get ETH and all that kind of stuff. So there is ways to kind of circumvent, so to speak, from the trader perspective, the end time and all the wisdom of the crowd, price oracle.
Of course, there's nothing stopping somebody from coming in there and deciding to still trade after the fact. But
it's open. They can trade even if a market's finalized. Trading is constant. Trading doesn't ever end, and that was a decision to simplify the contracts.
That's interesting, though, because obviously what you described is a completely viable way of doing a tournament long prediction market that is not too cumbersome for the bettors, right? We can sort of agree to pay them out, and we can even create some smart contract logic and expose it to show that.
Exactly. And I mean, again, the beautiful thing about the Cheese Wizards, the tournament is the fact that anybody can spin one up, right? So maybe you spin up your own particular tournaments that are totally ingrained into this marketplace. And that's what gives it a little bit more incentive than the other people's tournaments, right? You have this whole other thing that exists around it that drives information and interesting things out of it and into it. But
Yeah,
you're
and
right;
there's
you've nailed the constraints of the platform, and I think you got a really good understanding of actually how to maneuver around them.
yeah, and then
So
if
what I just wanted to get a little more clarification about, sorry to cut you off, is just like, what does it look like when someone continues to bet after I've, like, say I did like a tournament long prediction market and I paid it all my users, but people continue to bet on it. Like, what does the settlement mechanism look like for them?
well, if you have winning shares, so when the market finalizes, the winning outcome is identified. If you have winning shares, you can trade them in and get ETH. Simple as that. So even if even if the market has been finalized, done, someone puts an order on the winning outcome, someone takes it, they can immediately just trade it in and get Ether.
Yeah, it just seems like a strange concept to me because like the result is known, like you're betting on something that's been decided.
Exactly. So you have to know what's going on, right?
Yeah,
If people want to give ETH away, then fine. You know what I mean?
yeah, sure.
But
Like if you want to make a low bet that no takers want, right?
right. You put a
Yeah,
skunk order on there just in case,
yeah.
for
In case
whatever
someone's
reason.
asleep at the wheel.
Exactly. Happens.
Okay. All right,
Some
so I
people put
understand. I think. Okay, that's
some
good.
people put orders on the book and they just totally forget about it, and they're just like, oh shit, I was doing something, and someone already took it, done, claimed it, it's done, free ETH. Cool. Yeah, thanks, Drew. I appreciate the questions. I hope that's really clarified stuff for future viewers.
And again,
Yeah, I'm feeling better about it.
for anybody else who's got questions, just don't have them yet, or they're going to have them in a bit or later time. Feel free to ping us on our Discord, and we'd be happy to help you.
Yeah, definitely. We have a cheesy channel that y'all can drop into. And thank you very much for organizing it. And I really enjoyed it. How about you, Andy?
I had a blast.
Yeah. Hope some socks were knocked off. That'd be great.
Awesome.
All
Thanks
right.
so much, Tom and Andy. It was really helpful. And we can definitely have you guys. We'll definitely record this and then share the recording with all the participants. And if you guys have any questions, you can definitely reach out to Tom and Andy on the Augur Discord channel. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you.
cheesy.
Take care, guys. Thank you.